Hello and good morning, everybody. This is Jeremiah, and we have another SketchUp webinar for you. Hope you're ready to learn a lot and take your SketchUp to the next level. Couple housekeeping items for you. Of course, this is being recorded, so you can rest assured you'll be able to watch it again. And at the very top of the screen is a view options. I like to click on exit full screen in case I need to get something on my monitor. So just note that that's where that is. And also do make note of that Q&A button for typing in your questions to get answered as we move along. Feel free to type on anything in there, and we'll get that answered and route it over to Jake, and make sure you're following along, and we're covering things for you and get you to where you want to be. SketchUp is amazing and powerful, and Jake is going to take us to that next level. Okay, Jake, take it away.
All right. Thanks, Jer. Welcome, everybody who's watching this live. Wanted to just give a good shout out to all those guys here today. So, like Jer said, this is for intermediate users for learning SketchUp into the next level here. We've covered a few other webinars going over the basics and the concepts of SketchUp, and we really want to start diving into how to utilize some of those tools. This is me, and I do like to consider myself a decent SketchUp user. So as we go through things and you guys have questions, we can try to answer those too. We do want to introduce plugins, or what they call extensions as well, into our workflow now. We want to talk about components. We kind of left off last webinar in the basics part 2 and kind of touched on components. We just didn't have enough time, so we're going to really dive into components, what types there are, when you would typically use those, and then we're going to actually create a few types on the fly here. So then as we start building this model up and doing different things, we want to take just another deeper look into some of the dialog box features, kind of getting your bearings there. And then as we move through and work with these components, I'm going to show you just a couple cool little hidden features that are within the move, rotate, and even the scale tool. Just things to think about. So again, if questions do arise, feel free to type those in so that we can get those answered. Or if we have time at the end, we can even go into more of the plugin stuff, depending on how much we get through here. So extensions or plugins, wanted to give a few resources where we kind of reach out and look where we can get those into SketchUp. We've got our extension warehouse, which is obviously built right into SketchUp. And then we have these additional resources. Sketchucation, the SketchUp Essentials is a great one, and smuster.com is a really good one as well. So browsing those, there are so many different plugins out there for doing all kinds of different things. Essentially just trying to make your workflow a little bit better. Now, getting started with the extensions and where do we start with those? This is definitely not the list, but this is definitely one that will get you kind of going and introduced to as you start drafting and stuff like that. So as we get into more function specific things, whether it's building houses or fences or roadways, there's definitely different plugins that handle those. I've listed these as kind of as you start drafting and getting your plans ready, there's some really, really cool plugins that help speed up those processes. So wanted to give this list because we're not going to touch on every one of these as we go through, but some of these are paid, some of these are free. So just sort of putting that out there to encourage you guys to go out and actually look for different types of tools and try them out because they're very, very nice and handy to have. So, I'll try my best to get through quite a few of these in different examples as we go through the plan there. So without further ado, again, reminder, get those questions in, but we're going to actually just get going. Let's go play on some SketchUp stuff because we've got a lot to cover here. So in our last webinar, we sort of talked about how to navigate and move through line work and stuff like that, but we did things a little bit of the old-fashioned manual way to try to fill in this stuff. And again, line work is line work, but SketchUp needs faces to be able to extrude and make 3D. So how we actually complete these lines and see where we need to intersect to fill in the faces to get those faces can be a little bit tedious, especially on little intricate line work here where you got to sit there and intersect pieces to close in the gaps. So what kind of tools do we actually have available to us as we go through? Now, if we're using the Land Effects plugin, as we go from CAD and sending layers over, there are a few little scripts in there that help make those faces where it can. But if you're bringing in your line work or creating stuff just straight from SketchUp, there are definitely other tools here. So what I'm going to do, this one's called Make Face, and Make Face is probably one of my favorite ones because I don't have to sit there and draw and connect through all these different little areas. I can select the line work that I want included in this command here, and I can actually go up here. I've got a couple other things off to the side that don't fit on the screen here, but we're going to go ahead and click Make Face. And Make Face is going to go through, it's going to look at things, it's going to intersect lines where it can, and it's going to fill in every possible face that it can find throughout this whole selection. You can see that without really doing any more work, I've already connected now all of my different faces. It's cut through all of this intricate line work that we've got going on here. So really, really powerful. Saved me already at least 10 minutes of time just trying to make those faces. Now, obviously there are certain areas that it didn't create. So, you know, what do we do there? Obviously looking for the fact that I don't have closed off lines, so this isn't going to ever fill in. But trying to see why this didn't, we can select this again and just run the tool again, see what happens. It's going to look through, it's going to find things, and again, based on what it can find, it still couldn't make a face there. So now I know I've got some cleanup. I've got a few other things to try to figure out why this isn't closing off. There's the old-fashioned way that we can sit here and just try to close off these lines and see where it's not working. So I know that I'm kind of narrowing down kind of where that problem arises. It's somewhere in this vicinity here, but I can keep going around. I can narrow this thing down. I can erase these little lines as I go to try to find out where exactly my issues are. Now, I'm actually going to run a different command, a different plugin here that'll show me where I've got issues. Now I can do, again, just like Make Face, I can just select everything and I can run this. It's these edge tools squared is the plugin here, but I can actually find all end segments in the plan and it circles them so I can see exactly where I've got issues. And as I hover over each one of these little dots, you can see that it tells me my different options. And sometimes there's no solution within that range of the setting there. And sometimes it'll tell me what it'll do. This is going to project to the edge. And I can just click on that circle and it will complete that command. So it's removing edges, it's extending edges, and those are like little, obviously CAD drafted items that was kind of a sloppy line work that was done in CAD that carried over to SketchUp. And if we were to look in, try to zoom in as close as we could, that's the kind of stuff that gets us in trouble. So really trying to hone in on that, project to the edge so that it can extend and cut in the face like it should. such a time saver as we go through here and hover over these, remove those extra edges, project to the edges, and really cutting into our faces here. So now, I don't remember if I saw anything here. Let's try to run that one more time. So it looks like we're good. Obviously, it's going to find all of our parking lot lines. We'll be good with that for now. Let's go ahead and see if that allows us to make that face again. So we'll run that command, and look at that. It filled it in because it now had that proper line work done for those areas. So just in minutes, we can just simplify the process of getting those faces to where we need them so that we can have a usable base plan. So from that, obviously, we start to build up our models. We either use the offset commands to run our curbing and do all kinds of different things. But sometimes, or all the time, as you bring in that line work, SketchUp doesn't respect it like AutoCAD does. It's going to be all individual line segments. And that's, the same for everything around here. So it's a very time-consuming thing to be able to sit there and hold shift or hold control and select all the lines that you want to include in the offset command, let's say. So maybe I wanted to offset this building in for a wall. Now that's going to just take forever to try to select all those individual lines. So another little quick trick is how you click. As you can see, I'm just single left clicking in any of these areas and it selects that. But if I double click into an area, it actually selects that face and the bounding edges. If I triple click, it will select everything that is attached to those that item that I clicked on. So I can pretty quickly just select in here, because I know this is my building, double click, and if I hold shift, I can deselect that middle. And that was much quicker to select the line work that I needed. Now, it's still not going to prove very useful, because I can run that command, I can offset, as I need to here, and it'll do what I need it to. But once I let go of that selection, it's back to that single line work. And that's not what we want. So we're going to just go ahead and run one more plugin here. And this is essentially like the join command in AutoCAD. And it's called Weld. And if we weld all of that selection, you can see that it's taking it based on where it's was able to. It's still cutting it at those different lines. So maybe the better way would have been to actually create a group out of this building so that it was separate. And as I go into this group, let's find that group again. Try that one more time here. So I'm going to make a group. I'm going to go into this group, and it looks like it didn't carry my lines. We're going to try that one more time, sorry. Okay, here we go. That's funny. Didn't realize that group would actually not carry lines over. So we'll try that one more time, but only with the stuff there. So you can see now I've got this line work that is in this group now, and we'll just lift it off so I can select it here. And you can see it's all that single line work, so I'm going to triple click it, and I'm going to weld it. And you can see now just with a single click, that is all connected. So again, trying to make this a lot easier to select different things and line work through the drawing. Now I have my building layer. I can select this guy. I can simply make a face out of him, and we can start to extrude him up. for that building there. Now, another command, this is actually really cool and fun here, is say that I've got things that are actually hovering above my plan and I wanted to bring him down to that object. I've got another command called drop GC, and this takes any group or component and it will drop it onto the face. And what that allows us to do is obviously do our line work where we need it, reference where it's going to be, and then just simply drop it on instead of trying to move it down to the proper spot. So that's actually really, really neat here. So we're going to do that one more time over here. I'm going to do that trick by double clicking so that I didn't have to select each one of these individual curve lines here. But I'm going to double click and I'm going to deselect just those two edges so that I have my single curved boundary here, and I'm going to run that weld command. And if I do that, now you can see a single click will get me to where I need to be for that item. So now, if we wanted to extrude this up, this might be something that you've done or wanted to do, is we can't push pull up just a single line surface, but we could make a copy, by holding the control key and bringing up a copy of that line however high we want. I don't think it worked. So let's make a copy, 18 inches. Where's he going? For some reason, he is not liking this either. I wonder if it's my file. There we go. Okay, so I could do that, but then how do I make my face in between all of these different areas? I would have to start connecting those lines down across this whole curve and connect it back, because even if I've connected this bottom side, it's not going to matter because these aren't coplanar. These are all different planes at each one of those curved intersections. So making a wall like that is kind of a tedious task there. So what we're going to do is we're going to use another command called Extrude Line. And extruding this line lets me select that line and then pick my first point and a second point. And I can bring it into the direct axis here, and then I can simply click it. And once I click, it's going to do that process for me. It's going to take that line, it's going to bring it up, and it's going to fill in every one of those edges there. That's how many lines we would have had to draw to make that complete the faces there. So again, with very, very little effort, I can actually make these curved walls and edges that way. Now, obviously, what we could have done is we could have, selected this line here. We could have offset him 4 inches, and then we could have pulled him up to make that. But now I've got a thick face, and maybe that's not what I was intending for this specific item. So being able to make that wafer thin edge just like we wanted it is doable by that plugin then. So now maybe I did want to push pull it. Maybe I did want to take this line and let's make a copy of it just halfway down. And maybe I wanted to make this an actual, maybe a bench wall, a seat wall or something. Well, we have another great plugin called push pull, a joint push pull. And what that allows us right here, that allows us is we can even thicken a selection, and even on a curved face, because if we were to try this with a regular, you're going to see I get that, cannot push a curved or smooth surface. Well, this tool right here, this thicken tool, allows me to, at the same time, push and pull or make that wall a thick wall. So now we can go 18 inches, and that's going to automatically push that wall out the entire way around without us needing to do anything. Then I can go ahead and I can take this wall here, we can make him 6 inches, and you can see that he now is thick all the way around as well. So again, with very little effort, this is the power of some of these tools. Pulling those curved surfaces and stuff like that definitely helps go along the way. Again, if we were to, another fancy one here that I'm going to show is called divide faces. And this is, again, part of the Edge tool set, that Edge tool plugin here. But it's kind of cool. And I was playing around with it and definitely see some good potential for where this would be used. But it asks you to pick a line. And so depending on the orientation of that line, if I click on that line and I just drag over any face, it's going to stay parallel with that line that I clicked, but it's essentially going to draw that line on any one of those faces. So that makes it kind of neat to be able to subdivide, and you see how that line grows with the shape of that face that I'm clicking on, which is really cool because I can actually draw a line and connect that face and divide that face in the exact orientation or direction that I want, without needing to use the line tool and click here and try to match it up with this line here and match it up and then click 2 points and potentially mess up that line. But simply just using this divide face, click on this sidewalk line, it allows me to go to any one of these areas, and I know that I'm going to be parallel with that line wherever I go. So I can subdivide, and it has cut in that face. Really neat tool. I just discovered that one as I was playing around with this, so figured I'd show that one there. So I'm going to pause here before I move on, if there's any questions.
I've been able to answer a couple of minor little questions so far, but just reminding people, you're welcome to type in any questions into that Q&A box, and we'll get them answered.
Cool. All right, so as we move on and pretend we've got now step ahead and we've got our terrain done and all that kind of stuff, well, the problem that we've had, or we have as you work with terrain, is you can't really take a line, and we should go into this so that I can select here, is we can't really draw on this surface, right? It cuts through and it doesn't actually mold to where that terrain is going. So it makes it really hard to work on these curved surfaces or on these topographies. And if we were to view that hidden geometry, this is essentially what we would have to abide by as we draw these lines and cut into each one of these faces so that it cuts where we want it. Now that's just a little bit too much work to want to try to do that. Now we're not going to go over the sandbox tools too much here in this webinar, but there are ways to drape your line work on top of topography, but there's also another plugin that is really handy. So I'm going to turn this off, and it's called Tools on Surface. And the Tools on Surface is a great tool set as you work with topography. I can just simply draw, if I want to, on top of this surface here, and it follows. It's essentially drawing at each one of those points, but it's drawing where we go here. So keep going this way, and we'll come back down to there and back over. So you can see that without needing to turn on that hidden geometry and click to each one of those points, I'm able to really quickly draw right on top of those curved surfaces to be able to, whether it's change the material, use then in conjunction with the joint push-pull tools, I can grab like this extrude tool and click on this face, bring him up or down, and it's going to extrude that face in respect to that grade just fine, just like that. And I can go back to drawing with one of these tools on surface. Maybe I want to draw a circle. And that circle is going to match that grade. And again, being able to take my material here and fill that in. And again, I can't use my normal push-pull tool, but if I want to bring up that guy here, I can do that. So really easily working on this terrain stuff, made possible by this tools on surface, joint push-pull, really cool tools. Now, if we're using the Land Effects plugin for the planting side, it's obviously going to do all it needs to do to drop those components on the surface and stuff like that. But maybe you want to just play around in SketchUp, and we're going to go ahead and open up some components here just to play around. And we're going to grab some people. All right. We'll grab this person. And we'll grab this person. Oh, she's a 3D. We don't want the 3D guy. So we'll just go ahead and pick this guy. You got to be careful with bringing in components, and this is going to sort of lead right into where we're going next here with components is this component warehouse is free for anybody to download their stuff. And if it's not set up properly, which is what we're going to try to cover here, it's going to be a little bit difficult as you start using these components and stuff. But you can see that this was a 3D guy. That's a very detailed model right there. Again, it's going to tax the system just a bit here. But what we can do here is, wow, these are really taking a long time. We're going to not put those in there. And we're going to add a couple other things. Just want to show you one more fun tool that I think has some warrant here. So we'll just go ahead and grab a couple of these trees to scatter around. And these are planned trees. That's great. All right. So we'll place that guy. Place him in there. We'll place him in there. All right. Now that we got these trees in here, looks like these guys aren't even face me's. So that's what we're going to cover. How to make a face me tree. Because you see this, they're paper thin, but how is that a usable tree if I'm positioning myself around here? Okay, so let's go ahead and make one of those. We got the same type of issue going on here. This is an image I brought in. It's a PNG, but we're going to explode him just so that he's basically an image on a face, a texture on a face. We're going to use the follow me or the freehand tool just to make it quick here. And I'm going to trace this silhouette. This will be a little bit rough, but this is how fast it can be to make your own face me tree. So as we get around, obviously try to form to the shape there because it's going to take shape of the shadow, or the shadow will help take this shape as much as it can. So we don't want it to just be a square. We'll come back down and we'll bring it down to there. So now you can see that the face is cut out. I can go ahead and I can remove those bounding edges, and I can double click so it selects everything, deselect the center, and right click on the edge and hide those lines so that it looks just like a tree. So what I can do is I can double click on it again and right click and make it a component. We're going to make this component, but we're going to set that axis. This is probably one of the number one things that we got to remember as we start making components, no matter what kind it is. But we're going to set the component axis, and we're going to put it in the spot where we want to be able to insert it from. So as we go ahead and click here, this is the next important thing. Where do we want that axis of that component to be? Obviously, we want blue to be up. So let's put red in the same direction, and we'll throw green in the same direction. And I'm going to say always face camera. When I say create, now I'm not going to create it yet because this is the next part. I almost forgot. We need to be able to put the proper definition of that component to use, because this is going to be how the system looks at it. It's going to be easier for you to find things and place it. So we're just going to call him birch tree. And we don't want to glue him to anything. We'll show you what that means in a little bit, but we'll say create. Once I do that, based on that orientation of that axis, you can see now that he will always look at me when we go around in orbit here. So another little trick is we want to obviously scale this to the right size of tree. And if I were to dimension this guy here and use my tape measure, he's 30 feet tall. So that's actually decent. Let's check his width just to see what he's relative to. 2'8". Now that's not accurate. So let's turn on our hidden geometry and we'll measure these 2 points. Okay, yeah, so he is 2'8". So maybe he needs to be a little bit wider. Maybe he is a skinnier tree, definitely not 2'8". But we can scale this guy up to a specific height if we want to, just by getting a point here. So I'm going to gauge him here and put a point there. And if I use my tape measure tool, go point to point, I got to find a line, sorry. If you have an endpoint that you can reference, you can go end to end, and it'll actually ask you to enter the value size that you want it to be. So we'll go ahead and put him as a 35-foot tree and say yes to actively scale that guy. And now he is a 35-foot tree. So we can erase those guide points and turn off our hidden geometry. And I'm just going to copy him so we can put him in the plan here. So now you can see how he acts differently than these other guys that we put in. That's a proper looking guy right there. So now if I were to go into my components, go into the model, we can see that the birch tree, there he is. And I place him, he's coming in at that insertion point, and I can plop him in there. So really quickly I can use that component in other places, but I'm just going to use these other trees even though they're incorrect, and we're going to use this last extension here, the ray tracer. And the ray tracer is similar. It has a drop components option and stuff like that, but I particularly find the spray can kind of fun. And as you look at what it's trying to do here, it's showing you a position and where it's going to put these different things here. So if I were to shrink that radius down to 10 feet, it will only focus in and placing stuff within that area. But as I click, you can see that if I single click, it starts to just plop them in. But if I click and hold and drag, it puts in different things at those little insertion points there, and it mixes them up and it sprays it through that area. So if I were to increase that radius, its density would be a lot less, but I could just scatter things across. So mass planting and stuff like that, it's kind of fun. So just another little tool there. Now we're gonna really look at making some components and how they actually function and work. So we're going to make a little post, and we're going to make it for the use of a deck railing. And I've actually pre-made a little silhouette that I want it to look like. And we're going to use the Follow Me tool. And the Follow Me tool is a really fun one just to play around with. And I kind of showed that in another webinar. But if I have my silhouette, what I want it to look like, I can actually shortcut, select the face that I want it to follow, click on my Follow Me tool, and click on the edge that I want basically to cut out. And if I do that, you can see that it went around that whole square and it made that option there. If I didn't pre-select a face, I can click on the face that I want to cut, and you can see the guide of where it's going to follow and where it's going to cut. So I'm going to come clear back on itself, and you can see that it cut itself out. So really neat. You can make those curved surfaces and different things like that. Now, what if I actually wanted to, put an offset on this guy here? Well, I can't offset a curved surface, but I do have these tools here in that Tools on Surface plugin, where I can click on that guy and I can make an offset. So really, really quickly I can do that if I want to. Again, if it were straight up and down, just like this, another really cool feature, and I found this one as I was messing around with stuff, is I'm just going to select all those surfaces. But this extension is called multiple offsets. And multiple offsets allows me to, I'm just going to stick with a constant, and I'm going to do a 1.5 inch offset, and we're going to go inside of that area. And you can see that it consistently made that offset on all of those faces that I selected. So really quickly, it allows me to put those in there. Then I can go ahead and I can, inset those. I can just double click to repeat that command, and really start having fun with how we build that component up, or build that thing for preparation to do a component. Obviously I can't push pull this guy, but I can extrude him with that joint push pull tool. So again, really, really powerful ways to be able to draft these types of shapes and just have fun with it type of a thing. So we're going to actually get rid of those. I don't want those in my component here, but we're going to make a component. Now, the next thing you got to think about, we talked about inserting that or changing that axis, is we've got to think about how we're going to place this. What's the use of this? Is it going to be easier to go from the center of this object, or is it going to be from an edge? Because it's going to be hard to gauge, or you're going to move it more times if you're not putting that axis point where you want it. So just think about that, but we're going to go ahead and we're going to right click on that selection and make a component. I'm actually okay with the insertion point and the component axis being right there, but we'll go ahead and say this is our 4x4 post, and we will go ahead and create it. So now that we've created that component, we really can start placing it simply by copying it, or by coming over to our component manager and seeing what was in the model and picking it from the list. And you can see that it's pulling from that corner. So it makes it really easy for me to position him along that. Now, obviously, as we get over to another side, there will be some movement that we got to do, but we're going to go ahead and just place him here, just so he's in the model. And we're going to wrap this deck, and we're going to do this in the fastest way possible. Even while I'm explaining it, we're going to do this in a way that we utilize the component functionality here. So with that in mind, I do want to be able to put a lower railing bar on it and an upper railing bar, and we'll put some stuff in the middle. So I don't want to touch this component, but I do want to put, and we'll just do a couple guidelines here. We'll go to the center of this guy, and we'll go to the center of this guy. So I want my railing to start here, and I'm just using the tape measure by pressing T, and as I pull up, it creates that guide for me. So I can draw a rectangle, along this face here, and we can go 2 inch by 2 inch. Oh, come on. 2 inch, comma 2 inch. And just double click on him, and we will make him a component, and we'll call him 2 by 2 lower rail. And we're going to set his axis. Now, again, this one might be easier to position him in the center of this actual component here. So if we come down, I can actually use the midpoints as a guide to click and position. Now, think about how this would be inserted. We're going to do this a couple different ways here, but we'll go ahead and just match what is already here, and we'll say create. And now if I were to just simply move him, get him out of the way here so I can see where midpoint, and position him down. And we'll carry him over. So he's now right there in the middle of that guy here. But if I double click in him, we can pull him out. But you can see that he's technically in the blues up and the red is over to the right there. But what happens when I insert that rail? Is that how I want it to place? It looks like it. But let's try to edit him, and let's glue him to any surface. And let's see if this goes. You see how he now connects differently as I drag him along. He starts moving around. That's actually not the orientation that I want that axis to be, and as I place him on there, I want him to always sort of face out from the face that I'm going to click on. So I can right click on a component and change his axis. And you can see that right away, and actually I need to move him out so I can look at this side here, and we're going to put a little guide right here on the model here so I can use him as a reference point. So I'm going to change the axis, but I'm going to put it on this surface. Now you're going to notice that if I click it in, I can just position him wherever I want to, and that face, that shaded face, is really what we're focusing on here. We want to see how I can get it to be following this flat face here. So, and again, forgive me, I haven't found an easy way to position him this way. So let's just see if we can orient him in the right way. And we'll do this way just, there we go. So now, if I were to click on this guy, you can see he actually positions himself. He's actually backwards. So that's a good way, but you can just really start playing around with changing that axis and find out which way it needs to be in order for it to actually function the way that you want it. So if we go this way, then let's try that. See, now it's a different orientation. So it's really a trial by fire on that guy there, but we're going to just simply go back and use him as he is right here. So as I have this component and I've got this component here, I'm going to put those together as a nested component. I don't need those guidelines anymore, but we're going to go ahead and we're going to make a component, and we can call this a rail section, because that's the little section that we're going to copy around. And I'm good with where this is positioned for the actual insertion point, so we're going to create it. And now he's a rail section. So as I look in here, I can grab him and I can position him wherever I need to and rotate him as I need it. So now that I have him, we're going to make a copy of him by using the move tool. And we're just going to put him, we're going to move him this way, and actually I want to rotate him first just so I don't have to rotate the other ones. So we're going to position him where he needs to be. We're going to make a copy of him, and we're going to show those hidden commands with the copy feature. So as I'm dragging him out this way, maybe I want them every 4 feet. So that's 4 feet apart, and we'll go ahead and say I want 4 times that. And it automatically starts putting them at 4 feet, and there's 4 of them. I can simply hit 5 times. It'll put in another one. That actually got me really, really close. Maybe I didn't want to be that close. Maybe I want to go every 6 feet, but only 3 times. So I can move between how far apart these are just by typing the measurement. And we'll go 5 feet and then type 4 times or 3 times. Sorry, I did 3 inches. 4 feet, 4x, 5x, and see really where it makes sense to be. So maybe that's where it is, but I'm going to do 6 foot, and I'm going to do 3 times. So now that I have all those there, I'm just going to make a copy of those 3 things. Actually, we can do all 4. And we're going to grab that other reference point and make a copy of it. And we'll put it on this end. And all I need to do is really rotate him back this way and move him back to where he should be. And we'll do the same thing to this guy and move him back here. So now I've kind of got this outline of what I want it to do. And I can go into one of these components, and here's where that power is. I'm going to simply double click into that component. You can see that every one of those other components clicks or selects. I'm going to double click into there, and I'm going to pull. You can see that as I pull him out, every other one of those components is doing the exact same thing, basically finishing the work for me on all the other parts. And I can go ahead and I can make a copy of this guy, and we can bring him up. So let's hit the up arrow so that it locks it in the blue direction, and I can see where I actually want to put him. And I do not want to mess with the length of this guy now, because he's really where he should be, but you can see that I've got a gap here. So what I can do is I can select a component, and I can right click on it, and I can make it unique. Making it unique will actually kind of detach itself from being the old one. And you can see in the entity info, he's now lower rail number 1. So it basically puts a 1 after it. But I don't even want the number 1, and I want to put that as the upper rail. So just in a simple make unique and change the name definition of that component, now I have an upper rail and I have a lower rail. And I can just double click into this upper rail. I can use push pull. I can inset them in just for a purpose of cleanliness there. And you can see that now every one of those has done that. So how I get my other guy in there, I'll just go into that component again, and let's make a little guideline just right here to get to the center of this guy. So we'll go 1 inch in, and we will draw a little circle, and we'll do 0.5, make a little 1 inch guy here, and we'll push him out just a little bit, and triple click on it and right click, and let's make it a component. And that component, again, we set the axis. This would probably make more sense to be on that midpoint of that upper section or lower section, however we want to. So we'll go ahead and just do it right here in the center, but keep it with that same red green axis, and we'll call him centered circle rail, and we'll say create. And so then we can just double click into him and push pull him the rest of the way down and connect him in. So you can see I've got one of each of those, or in each one of those guys here. But I can also select him. We'll do that same move trick, make a copy, but I'm going to put it at the other end, kind of where I want it to end. And then I'm going to do, instead of timesing it, I'm going to divide it. So I'm going to do 7 divide, and you can see that it puts in 7 equally spaced ones. Maybe it's 8 divide. And I can start playing with how close I want those. Obviously, if there's a specific distance, then we would follow those standards. But right away, you can see that I've already made an entire deck just by placing one of these components, making unique certain instances of it. But again, being able to take that section, put him as a copy, reference him to that point, and now he's overlapping, but maybe I wanted a stairway right here. So I can actually select both of those items and make these 2 items unique. So now these 2 act similar, and maybe we can say, instead of section number 1, we can say opening. Once we do that, we can go in here. We would do the same thing. We would make these components, since these components are derived out of the same component over there. We would essentially need to make unique every one of these components, and we could just select all of them, and now all of these would be changed to opening. So we can take that guy and change him. We would change him, and we would change one of these guys here, because that definition is already done, so it's going to rename all of these guys here. But now with that done, I can actually just go into one of these components, just one of these guys, use the push-pull, and you can see that since they are sort of facing each other, they're oppositely attracted, if you will, and so it's adjusting based on that. And so we could really start making our guides for how big we want this. I'm just eyeballing it for now for use of time here, and we'll just select those guys, delete them out. So I've just affected one side, but it's changing the other. I can go into this and take a copy of just that rail. Since they're unique, it's only going to affect these two, and it's going to leave these guys alone. But I can really start to make a difference on you know, how quickly I can draft something like that, make changes to anything like that, just in a click of a button. So wanted to stop there for any other last questions before we show one more thing.
We had a really good question, got me Google searching here. But regarding that make unique, Henry asked if it makes any sub-components unique as well. And it doesn't, but speaking of great plugins, I found a few good plugins that purport to do that, to make sub-components unique. So again, just some of the power of the different extensions out there.
Yep, exactly. So making unique for an outer component will leave everything underneath it the same as anything else. So that's why we kind of went in there and selected everything to make those unique as well. But yeah, plugins would absolutely expedite that process. But again, just with a matter of minutes being able to do this, and again going back to maybe we wanted to you know, paint this a specific color type of a thing, you know, go into one of these guys and you can see that it would essentially, even going into one of those further, would color every one of those items that is part of that same component. So I only have to go into one of these guys to paint this stuff, and go into this guy, and I've already painted this entire railing there, so minus those into that other group. But that's how fast it can be. And see if we can do this in less than a minute here. We're going to go in and we're going to make one more component, but we want to be able to, let's make a circle window here. So I'm going to double click, I'm going to make it a component, and the other option is to glue to any. And this allows us to cut an opening or glue to specific surfaces, but we want to glue to any and we want to cut an opening. What this is going to allow us to do, and we'll just call this a mirror, or not a mirror, that's a window. You can't see through mirrors. So anyways, we'll go ahead and create him, but we'll double click, we'll make a few other modifications here. We'll put him out a little bit, and then we will paint his surface. So let's go ahead and grab some glass, make it all pretty so you can see through it, and poof, that's my component. Now, the power of this is unfortunately admitting my bad defaults as I learned SketchUp. I made this window right into the wall. I can't move this guy without trying to select everything. Big pain. But making a component that glues to anything allows me to take that window, and as you can see, it starts to follow any one of those surfaces. But once I click it in there, it automatically cuts it into there. But if I move it, it doesn't cut the actual surface. So really powerful way to make certain things in your plan for that type of functionality. Deleting it off of the thing is super simple, and it doesn't hurt the integrity of the rest of your stuff. So kind of leaving it there, and if there's any last questions.
Well, that was kind of the coolest thing I've seen all week. So that was a really neat way to end it. If we didn't get to your questions, email us and let us know, of course, either way, what you want to see with the next SketchUp webinar, where we should take it. And otherwise, have a great weekend.
Thanks, guys.